Welcome, I'm Glanvill, and this is video 2 in my Calmness in Mind process, where I teach you common sense strategies that you can use on yourself to find more emotional calmness and well-being, in addition to any medical advice and any medication you may be already receiving. Now, because this is going to be a very comprehensive guide, we are going to start with first principles and work our way up to the really cool stuff. Please be patient if you've heard some of this before, because as I mentioned in my last video, just because you consciously think you know something, it doesn't mean your unconscious brain does. So let's dive in, and if it's safe to do so, what I'd like you to do is close your eyes and take a moment to place your awareness on your breath, on your breathing. And now I'd like you to place your attention on how you feel on the inside. And now, can you evaluate how noisy or how quiet the thoughts are in your head? Okay, open your eyes. Let's just consider what just happened. Is breathing a conscious or an unconscious process, or is it both? You placed your attention on your feelings, but what exactly is your attention? And what indeed are your feelings? Who is the you that was checking how noisy your mind was? And what is the mind that is making all that noise? In one simple exercise, there can be many different perspectives, okay, of who or what you are. And as we proceed, I'm going to teach you how all these different elements work, okay, and how you can use all these various aspects of yourself far more efficiently and effectively and with less conflict. Now, I've read many times that loud noises and falling are the only fears that we are born with, and every other fear that we have is learned. Well, I don't quite see that as the complete truth. I think falling and loud noises naturally invoke our inbuilt startle response, within our central nervous system, and that response makes us jump. And when we jump, we pay attention to what's happening around us. So I think to call this response fear, I believe, is in error. Perhaps we should call it a message of pay attention or look out. Our brain sort of saying, hey, John, be aware, be aware, be aware. And of course, sometimes it may be true that you need to be aware, and other times it could be an error of thinking or an error of something happening around me. Our body may get alarmed or flooded with chemicals that stimulate us ready for the fight or flight response. But I'd like to say, let's not call that fear. Let's use a new language. Perhaps we can say, my unconscious mind and my body have been triggered by some event or some thoughts, and they want to get my conscious attention. Yeah. And if there's no real threat, we can say, my unconscious got it wrong, never mind, but it still released all these fear chemicals within me, so I can be calm in my mind, even though my body will still be agitated with these chemicals, until these chemicals can run their course and become burned off. And this is an important message as we move through this course, that you can be still in your conscious mind, even if your unconscious mind is anxious, and even if your body is anxious. And this first degree of separation is a very powerful step. So when we were born, we had no real fears, no preferences, and no concepts about who we are and what we should be and what we should do and what we ought to do. We were just blank biological canvases waiting to be programmed. And programmed we were by our parents, our culture, school, religion, and 1,000 other factors into the person we are now. and that programming feels like me, okay? And because it feels like me, the assumption is that I should be able to control myself. I should be able to manage my thoughts. I should be able to manage my feelings in a moment's notice. But the truth is, we're not in control. Our breath just breathes us. Our thoughts just materialize from nowhere, and our emotions can overwhelm us or underwhelm us in a second. We are not in control. And this is really where we start our education of understanding ourselves at a deeper level. The absolute realization that we're not in control of anything. And I really mean anything. Can you tell me one thing, internally or externally, that you can actually fully and repeatedly, consciously, always control? I can't think of anything. We can't control our feelings, our thoughts. We can't control our actions. We can't control other people. We can't control the weather. There's very little that we can control. There's some things we can influence. I can choose to blink my eyes, but when I'm not focusing on it consciously, they blink by themselves. We really can't control outcomes. Okay, we can control our actions. I choose to do this thing, but the outcome is pretty much out of our control. Yes, we influence it, but the outcome, who knows what's going to happen? And certainly trying to control our emotions, it's very hard, if not impossible. So then, who are we? Because if we're going to learn how to overcome anxiety, OCD, or depression, we need to approach it from two new perspectives. Firstly, is there anything at all that we can entirely control? And secondly, who or what is the specific aspect of me that is trying to control those things anyway? So once again, if it's safe to do so, I would like you to close your eyes and just sit for a second in silence. And then I'd like you to be aware of the thoughts in your head. And I'd like you to count how many thoughts or images arise in your head. Okay, open your eyes. How many thoughts did you count? Was it 1, 3, 5? Were there no thoughts, no images? Well, the number doesn't really matter. What's important is this. Who is the you that did the counting? Yeah? Are you the one observing and counting the thoughts? Or are you the one creating and offering up the thoughts? Think about it, okay? Of course, at some level, you're both. However, as we progress, I will be asking you to keep perspectives like this in mind. Is it the conscious part of you creating fearful, anxious thoughts, or are they just appearing subconsciously on the screen inside of your skull, inside of your brain, completely unasked for? Now, later in this course, I'll be teaching you how all these things work. But for now, I just want you to imagine that there's a part of you which I'm going to call the observer. It's the part of you that watched the thoughts as they arose. It's the perspective of yourself who just peers out of your eyes, or while you're asleep, it just witnesses your dreams, okay? It's the part of you that watches and notices and observes everything that happens internally and externally. It's like a kind of silent watcher, okay, of all that happens internally and externally. In reality, this part doesn't really have any words or thoughts. They come after your observations. They come from other parts of your psyche, which I'm going to introduce you to in later videos. This observer aspect doesn't have any feelings. They come from your conditioned body, which is just responding to your thoughts. So although you may be the observer, you can still experience feelings, or you can still watch new thoughts, or you can still listen to other judgments as they appear inside of your brain. Now, if you already know this, then that's good. And if you don't, then that's fine too. It will become more evident in later videos. But for now, I'm just planting the seeds for the beginnings of how I want you to start to look at yourself. Consider this statement. My body responds to all my thoughts as if they were true or actually happening. Perhaps you imagine meeting up with some friends at the weekend and you get a nice little feeling in your stomach. Or you might think up of meeting up with a colleague who annoys you and you might get an uncomfortable feeling inside your body. In both of those scenarios, nothing real actually happened. You created a virtual reality story in your mind about what you thought would happen in the future, and your body responded with a feeling that was interpreted as either favorable or unfavorable. Your body can't tell the difference between a thought and reality or even a dream. You might suddenly wake up from a nightmare and your heart is racing and your body's all sweaty, right? Well, your body just had a panic attack in your sleep because your body thought the dream was real. Really think about this. A dream that you didn't ask for played out in your mind, out of your control, and your body thought it was real and gave you what it thought would be the correct emotional response. Where were you while all this was going on? Perhaps you might awaken from another dream which had sexual content and you find your body's become all aroused as if the dream was true. Your body just responds to thoughts as if they were true. You may remember an incident from childhood and find your mood changes instantly, or you watch a scary movie and although you know the blood is only tomato ketchup, your body gets scared and it doesn't know that. Your body simply responds to all your sensory inputs as if they really were the truth of what was happening around you. You really need to think about this. So if we go back to our story about meeting up with some friends in a few days, we may run some thoughts in our minds such as, oh, it'd be good to see them again. Oh, I really love that restaurant. Or, oh, I like hanging out with Bob because he's really funny. And these good thoughts, memories and images creates within the body a nice feeling. And because we have a nice feeling, we're looking forward to the event. Yeah? And we're very likely to ensure that we will go to that meeting place because if it feels good thinking about it, it will certainly feel good if we go and do it. But let's just break that down and see what it really means. A thought about something that has yet to happen kicked off a chain of events that subconsciously resulted in the agitation of our organs, which if gentle we call a feeling, and if strong we call an emotion. Yeah? And the subsequent release of chemicals into the bloodstream produce either a nice mood from which we make our decisions, or a horrible mood where we choose not to do it. And all of this happens in a few seconds and is mostly unconscious. And usually for people with anxiety or OCD, the emotional decision feels right, but it may in fact be wrong. You may think to yourself, I can't stand up to my boss because I feel too nervous, rather than thinking, although my body is nervous, my self-worth will not accept being spoken to like that by my boss. What happens is anxiety, OCD and depression over time, they uncalibrate people's emotional acuity. They lose the ability to trust themselves and they become worse at making decisions and become fearful of becoming overwhelmed by their own emotions. And any person trained in how to sell knows that people buy emotionally and then justify the expenditure with logic and reason. But because an anxious person's emotional system is out of whack, they can't trust their feelings and hence they struggle to make gut decisions. And then they lose themselves in what-if thinking, trying to find answers, which the unconscious responds to as if all those thoughts were true, which then fires off all their emotional systems, which exhausts them out and puts them into a loop of worry and exhaustion, which spirals down into anxiety and further down into depression or even OCD. It's just a process. Therefore, we need to explore emotions and thoughts a little deeper to see just what we're truly dealing with. Yeah? When we see a map of a human, it's easy to assume that we were always as we are now. However, in our distant past, we were very different indeed. And I would like to give you a very simplistic model to use to understand how we evolved and how we became who we are now. Allow me to be loose with my terminology and simplistic with my approach, because it's the concept that's important, not any tiny pedantic details. So let's reverse evolution and take ourselves back through time to understand how we really function. Yeah. And the part of our brain that controls logic, reason, language, and complex thinking, I'm told, only evolved in the last 30,000 years or so. Of course, it might have been 100,000 years, or it might have only been 12,000 years. It doesn't matter. But what does matter is our prefrontal cortex. And I'd like to loosely refer to this as our conscious, intelligent thinking mind. Yeah? And before this evolved, we were run by our limbic brain, or our emotional brain, which could be considered to be the unconscious, subconscious, or the automatic animal part of us. Our language was very simplistic back then, as speech was mainly located in the newer parts, and we made decisions subconsciously and automatically without language by responding to our environment and responding to our sensory inputs. Our subconscious non-verbal limbic brain would make decisions to keep us alive from the following perspective. We are animals, and all we want is food, water, shelter, production. We are non-verbal, and we are probably only as intelligent as perhaps an 8-year-old in the complexity of the strategies that we would use to remain alive and to respond to life. Our limbic brain told us what to do by sending messages through our autonomic nervous system to our organs, and then via the agitation of those organs, we would get a message of, yes, it's okay, that feels good, go do it, or oh, no, so step away from it. If it's good, step towards it. If it's bad, move away from it. Now, of course, at this point, I'm beginning to explain the fight or flight response, which I'm not going to go into much detail about, because you can go and read about this in a million places, and you should, okay? The sympathetic system, the parasympathetic system, fight, flight, or freeze. That's your homework. Go and research that stuff. But what I want to do is to entirely reframe fight or flight into what it really is, which is your old animal yes-no system. It's the way your unconscious mind makes decisions for you and tells your body what it wants you to do, much like within a dog and a cat. We communicate our orders to the body via the central nervous system, yeah, which creates feelings or emotions by agitating our internal organs, and we perceive those as instructions of what we should do. Move towards things that are good, or run away from things that are bad. Another way of looking at this is we unconsciously make non-verbal decisions that become interpreted by our bodies. Yeah? Should we go back even further, thousands of years, we only had a very simplistic reptilian brain. Okay, and this simple brain was also plugged into all of our organs, so impulses from our brain could tell us what to do via the agitation of our organs. However, this brain doesn't do much thinking. Okay, it's pretty much hardwired from birth with the primary animal program of how you should be. I'm told that the reptilian mind is much like that within a crocodile. Apparently all crocodiles always do the same thing, which is why the crazy guys who work with them are relatively safe, because they always know how the crocodiles will respond. And this system is still active deep within us, and we might call it our instinct or our survival responses. And during times of real danger, this system takes control. It turns off all of the other systems above it, okay, and it just instinctively tries to protect us. If I were to throw something at you, instinctively you would respond by closing your eyes and putting your hands up to protect yourself, okay? You almost can't not do it, okay, even if you try. And that's how deeply ingrained this system is within us. So personally, I just trust this part of me. I know that in times of danger, it will just kick in and do its best for me, even if the trigger is wrong. Like a leaf hitting your windscreen and you jumping out of the way, but it was only a leaf. Well, it's good that you jumped out of the way, because it could have been a rock. So it serves a very, very good purpose within us, but we can't control it. It just happens to us. Now, I really would urge you to find the time to research these three parts of the brain that have evolved over time. All three systems are still within you. all three systems are still active, okay? And each of them has differing goals for you. So as we learn how to handle anxiety, I'll be teaching you how to manage and reprogram these parts of your brain in great detail. And this is fundamental to you finding more calmness and happiness and desensitizing out-of-date emotional responses. I think this is the big area that most people fail to put in the effort to consciously retrain your unconscious brain with new stories and to consciously desensitize out-of-date emotional responses within the body, which of course is called exposure therapy, but we're not going to talk about that now. We're going to build up the whole story first, and then I'm going to teach you all about exposure therapy further down the course when you've got all the information you need. So let me summarize what we've covered here. Very simply stated, the way we evolved was like this. Originally, we were instinctive animals. We just habitually responded to life non-verbally via a pre-programmed reptilian mind. We then evolved to generate a limbic emotional mind that had the logic of a 7 or 8-year-old. However, we were still animals. Our brain unconsciously makes decisions for us and then informs us of those decisions through agitating our organs, which we call our yes-no emotions. And then more recently, we developed our prefrontal cortex and our neocortex, the part of the brain that adds language, logic, reason, rules, fairness, kindness, love, and all those aptitudes that make us a human rather than an animal. Put another way, evolutionarily speaking, we are emotional creatures who have recently learned how to think. Yeah? Conscious logical language-based thinking was the last capability that was evolved within us. It was an add-on to an already very successful childlike emotional animal creature. And it was what moved us from animals to humans. Now here's the takeaway that metaphorically I need you to recognize. The conscious part and the subconscious part of the brain are on two distinctly separate systems. One is who you feel you are and the other is who you think you are. The animal and the human, the feeler and the thinker, instinctual and logical, selfish and kind. And neither part truly knows what the other one is doing, yet we assume that they understand each other, but they don't. They're on two separate systems running within us, and we need to manage them both in different ways if finding calmness is our goal. Now, a person experiencing anxiety is primarily operating like a thinking creature who's trying to control their emotions, but that's just not how we're wired up, and it makes everything worse. Let me repeat this. We are emotional creatures who learn to think. Yeah? Your unconscious mind hardly understands what you consciously think, as it operates mainly by automatic responses and automatic programs. Your unconscious mind, which controls your emotions, is hardly listening to what you say. It's listening to how you say it. It's responding to your tonality, your speed of thought, and what your body language is doing. And this is why we talk softly and slowly to a baby. Oh, there, yes, okay, it'll be fine. It soothes their subconscious mind, okay, which subsequently soothes their body. Think about it. Your unconscious brain sits in the darkness of your skull, and what it would love to say to the conscious part of your brain is, right, listen, I'm your unconscious mind. It's my job to keep you alive. It's my job to give you the right emotion at the right time, which takes you towards that which is good for you and away from that which it perceives to be bad, or it has been trained to believe is bad or dangerous. I live in the darkness of your skull, and I don't understand language very well. Therefore, I rely on the speed, tone, and volume of your thoughts, yeah, and your body responses to guess what is happening in the external world and to hopefully provide you with the right responses. Much like a dog doesn't really know what our words mean, he's really responding to our tonality or our body language. We might say, oh, I really hate you, and he's wagging his tail. Or you might say, I love you, and he doesn't care. It's tonality and body behaviors. And it's the same with us. If I get anxious, I consciously say to myself, there, everything's fine, even if it's not fine, because I need to overwrite my old inputs to calm myself down. And for those experiencing anxiety or OCD, because your thinking and worrying are never ending and panicking, the unconscious biologically gets overwhelmed from being triggered all the time. It gets tired and drained, and this exhaustion is the source of all anxiety, OCD and depression. And I will prove this to you in the next video. For now, please be aware that we are entering into a vast topic. We've only just scratched the surface, okay? You don't have any answers yet because you still need to know more about what you're actually dealing with. So let's recap. What we covered today: do we want to be right or do we want to be happy? There's nothing that we can really truly control in life except for taking actions to see what outcomes happen. You know, we can influence things, but we can't control things. Repetition of the conscious reprograms the unconscious with new stories. And it's okay to fib to your unconscious to trick it into calming down and rewiring itself. By finding the observer aspect of yourself, it's possible to watch your thoughts and feelings rather than getting caught up in them. Your body responds to all your thoughts as if they were true, even if they're not true. We are emotional creatures who learn to think. Stop trying to be a thinking creature who's trying to control their emotions. Our unconscious mind doesn't process language very well. Therefore, you can't consciously think your way out of anxiety. It just makes things worse. And both your subconscious mind and your conscious mind are on completely separate systems, and they're not naturally working together. And this is at the core of your problem, and this is what I'm going to teach you to be able to do. And finally, your homework. I'd like you to read all about the fight, flight, and freeze responses and how the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems function. And in the next video, we'll be exploring where anxiety comes from and how it expands to include OCD or spirals down into depression. And we'll begin the process of looking at sensible types of exposure therapy to retrain your body. This is the last of my free videos, so please securely subscribe to my course in the link below to access over 60 videos, guided meditations, workbooks, and all the information you need to help yourself to find more calmness, self-esteem, and direction, all for the monthly subscription price of less than a coffee and a slice of cake each month. Thank you for listening. Let's get going, and let's get you on the path to a lot more calmness and action in your life. Cheers.